Is that it? Let's go, baby. Credits. All right. Let's talk about the ups and downs of Life is Strange 2. I'm going to turn this down just a bit. So, I'm playing these in order. I played Life is Strange 1. Absolutely adored it. Played Before the Storm. Thought it was okay, but didn't think it was nearly as good. And I think this is up to the quality of the first. I think this is overall a great game. I think part of that probably is because Don't Nod made it instead of Deck 13. I'm sorry, but I see a dip in quality with the Deck 13 game Before the Storm, and I know Deck 13 makes the next two, so that's a bummer for me. And I know that a lot of people don't feel that way, but I didn't think Before this. I thought it was good. It was still very good, but it just wasn't as interesting because it didn't have the supernatural stuff. The story just didn't grab me in the same way. This story grabs me. And in fact, I might even say that I like the story. In fact, I think I would say that I like the story in this one better than better than the original. I think this is my favorite Life is Strange story so far. There are some important differences. What really wowed me about Life is Strange originally, the first one, is that it started a little messy. It started good, and then it had some ups and downs. There were some hills and valleys in the story. There were parts of that game that I really didn't like at all. And then by the end, it really brings me back because the end of the original is so strong. I mean, they stuck the landing so perfectly in the original. This one is different in that it starts off incredibly strong. The story just at the jump is so cool and interesting. It's like that in the original too, but then it immediately starts to get less interesting. It's like the initial setup is really good in the original game, and then it's kind of meanders around for a little bit before it starts to get good again. This game never really had that moment where it meandered. The story is stellar all the way through. The only critique I'll add to that is that it starts out so strong that it never really gets way better. Right? It's like what was one of the things that I really loved about the first one is that it suddenly it's good at the beginning, and then it kind of gets up and down a little bit, and then that last episode is so freaking crazy and it's awesome. And they couldn't have done it better, I don't think. This one, it never had a weak point, so by comparison, the strong points maybe don't stand out as much. But every single episode in Life is Strange 2 is pretty peak from a storytelling standpoint. So, I'd hate to fault this game because it doesn't have it doesn't really falter, and so the best parts maybe don't look as good by comparison. It's just solid all the way through. It's all great with a couple of almost masterpiece storytelling parts. Like the beginning, I'd say episode 1 and episode 4 and episode 5 were all masterpiece level storytelling. I'd say 1 and 5 especially. The first and the last episode were my favorites. But the whole thing was just solid all the way through. Not solid, excellent all the way through. I noticed they made some changes to the art style. It's not as watercolor looking as the first one was. That initially was just slightly off-putting because I didn't think it had quite as much character, but within 3 minutes I had forgotten about it and it didn't matter anymore. So the art style is fine. I think the art style does have a little bit less character. I don't know why they decided to make that choice, but it's not like it's a bewildering choice. I think it's fine that they chose to go a little bit more straightforward. Maybe they thought it would be a little bit of a distraction, and maybe they would have been right. The characters, the writing for the characters, the voice acting, the characterization of everybody, the choices that they choose to make in the storytelling is all just god tier. It's all very, very good. I do have a couple of critiques, however. There are a couple of areas in this game that just don't really make a ton of sense. And this was true. This has been true in every Life is Strange game. And really, it's true of most of these choose your own adventure type games. but I think it's especially true with the Life is Strange series, and this is no exception. There are just some areas that they escalate so needlessly, and it's clearly just that they want to put the characters in these difficult positions, but they don't really earn it. Things just get out of hand really easily and really crazy, and suddenly if someone's pointing a gun at somebody, and it's like, this never really needed to happen. And maybe there is some realism to that, but it doesn't feel real. It's not really believable. It's like, these situations escalate so quickly when it's like so obvious that like you could have gone just a much simpler route, and you don't have any control over that as the player. It just happens. And so I think there were some scenes that were, especially in episode 4 and in episode 2, I think there were some situations that were they were written to be crazy when it didn't. I don't really feel like they earned it. It wasn't really very believable. The characters make some stupid choices, and this is true in all the Life is Strange games, but the characters make some dumb choices that you just cannot believe that they would actually, even kids wouldn't be this stupid, because you're controlling children, so they're going to make some dumb choices, but some of the choices are so dumb and it's to play into this plot device, this conflict to heighten that. And I just don't feel like it's that believable a lot of the time. The second thing, and this kind of plays into that too, is when it comes to those choices and things like that, this series has I won't call it a flaw, but I think it's a shortcoming compared to other choose-your-own-adventure type games like this, like The Wolf Among Us, or the Dark Pictures games, or the Quantic Dream games like Detroit Become Human. Those games, like, if you make certain choices, it completely affects like the whole scenes later on. Like there's a branching narrative where it's like you'll end up in a completely different place depending on what choices you make, and there's like whole scenes that don't happen, and if you play it a second time you'll have a completely different experience. It's very clear that these games don't work that way. It is very obvious that final scene, I won't spoil it, but that final conflict that you're in at the final episode, you would have been there no matter what. The endings that you get, and it was the same with Life is Strange 1. I haven't actually looked it up, but I'm just certain that it's the case. That you're gonna end up having basically the same experience. Your decisions affect certain things here and there. Maybe if somebody gets injured, or maybe an ancillary character dies. But at the end of the day, like the core of the story, it never changes. So it's not really much of a choose-your-own-adventure. You have some dialogue choices here and there, and there are some things that can change, and you have, there's a big choice at the end, like there is in all of these games, but it doesn't really... The game's not a different... If I play this game again and decide I'm going to make all the opposite choices, I'll have basically the same experience. If I did that in a Quantic Dream game, a Telltale game, less in a Telltale game, but still some in that, or in especially a Dark Pictures game, I'm going to have a completely different experience if I decide to make different choices. So it's not that that's bad. It's clearly a deliberate choice, but I don't think it's as exciting and as interesting to make the story in that kind of way. I would rather have a story that I have more control over where it goes. The final thing is that maybe that's it. So we talked about the not really having much agency in these games, and we talked about how some of the stories... Oh, well, this is kind of an add-on to what I've already talked about. But when you're in those scenes where you have a choice, or somebody's coming at you and there's a conflict and you're arguing with someone, and you have a choice that you can de-escalate or escalate, like you can get in their face more, or you can back off and try and throw an olive branch. I usually am the one that's like, all right, well, let's try and make this cool. Let's try not to piss this character off. And in those scenes where you have those choices, and I'm trying to do like the more peaceful thing, it doesn't matter. The scenes just escalate anyway. So I guess this is more of an addendum to the first complaint I had, is that those scenes are just designed to escalate. It doesn't really matter, it seems. What you can choose all the most peaceful options, and you still end up somebody's getting shot, or you're having to run away from whatever, or whatever. Everything continues to escalate regardless. So I guess it goes into that broad I guess I have one core broad complaint, is that the story is pretty much on rails, and you really don't have any control over it. And those rails entail these weird escalations that kind of feel like they come out of nowhere, because maybe if I'd chosen all the most violent options, they would make sense, but I'm not doing that. I'm choosing the peaceful options, I'm choosing the smarter options, and then they escalate anyway, so I'm just sitting here with the controller in my hand thinking, why am I even touching any of these? Why am I not just watching a movie, right? In the first game, with the rewind function with the time travel stuff, there's a little bit more of a gameplay element to that. It's a little bit more video gamey. This game isn't really video gamey at all. It doesn't have any of those extra video gamey things. And you know, in the first one, you could experiment more with your choices. But again, it doesn't really matter, because the choices are all going to lead you to the same final scene, final episode anyway, right? So, but all of that being said, I wouldn't call that a flaw, because it's not like they are trying to do that and they failed. They have made a choice to make this series more of an on-rails experience, where your choices affect some ancillary things and then maybe one big thing at the end. But you're on for the ride, and the ride's not going to change much regardless of what you choose to do. One thing that I have noticed is that in some games like this, if you choose to like click on all the extra stuff and read all the extra lore and talk to all the optional characters, sometimes that can affect like what you can do, and maybe even the ending, and like who lives and dies. Not in this game. I didn't touch any of that stuff, and we ended up in the same place anyway. So I don't do any of the optional stuff in these games, because it doesn't really matter. It's a little extra lore building, and that's it. Maybe some random stuff on the side doesn't happen or happens, but who cares? It doesn't really matter. But all in all, I still loved this game. I'm going to have to do some thinking as to whether I liked it more than the first or not. I don't know. But it's probably in that neighborhood. I mean, it is an A tier to God tier game. I thought the story is one of the best I've ever experienced in a video game. I'll come out and say that. This is one of the best stories I've experienced in any game. I mean, maybe top 10. I mean, it is an excellent story. That's all it is, pretty much. But it is what that part is excellent. So, okay, last order of business. Life is Strange 2. It has been a delight, an absolute blast. But we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye. Thank you. Appreciate you.